what is going on at Project Veritas. I must say I was a little startled to see this, and at first I thought, is this a rumor? But then I saw it reported a number of different places, and it appears not to be a rumor. Quote, breaking, James O'Keefe, founder and CEO of Project Veritas, placed on paid leave by the group's board as they consider removing him from leadership position. Now, I don't know what's going on, and I'm sorely tempted. James O'Keefe is a friend of ours. In fact, he's always inviting us to something or the other. One kind of slightly amusing tidbit is that O'Keefe doesn't have my cell phone, but he has Debbie's cell phone, but he thinks Debbie is me. So he's constantly texting her about this and that, sometimes the latest Project Veritas breaking story and stuff. And initially, Debbie politely told James, hey, James, this is actually Debbie. It's not Dinesh. But James paid no attention. And so Debbie now is essentially morphed into me for the purposes of cell phone communications with James, because it's hopeless to tell him that it's not really Dinesh's phone. In any event, we've had James in one of our movies, an interview with him in Death of a Nation. I think we also featured him briefly in Trump Card. And I was tempted to text him, hey, James, what's going on? Is everything okay? But I figured, you know what, if there's some internal turmoil, I know his hands are probably full. He's probably dealing with 40 different things. He's probably having all kinds of meetings and phone calls, donors, and so on. So I don't want to get in the middle of that. I'm going to leave some time, let kind of James work this through. I'd love to also have him at some time come on the podcast, depending on how all this plays out. But here's what we do know. One, without James O'Keefe, we really wouldn't have the Acorn story going back to the Obama days. We wouldn't have Ashley Biden's diary. We wouldn't have all these revelations about COVID mutations for new vaccines. We wouldn't have all these confessionals about what's happening with woke indoctrination in schools, corruption in the FBI, DOJ. So there's a whole bunch of big stories that Project Veritas has played a critical role in breaking. And they've shown us, in a way, the Twitter Files does this too. But until the Twitter Files, we only had Project Veritas, where you get people in an environment where they talk freely about what's going on. And it's a whole different thing than what their public statements are, what their public face is. I guess you could, when you call somebody two-faced, this is what you mean. They have one face that is their thespian actor face for the public, another face that is their true personality or their true identity. And that is true of institutions. It's true of government. James O'Keefe knows this, but the value of Project Veritas is it documents it with chapter and verse. So it's an organization, and it's an organization that really depends on James. I mean, who else is going to go and confront these guys who are caught on tape and go, hey, I'm James O'Keefe from Project Veritas? That's almost become a sort of trope on social media. Are you saying you can just swap out James O'Keefe for some other dude or some other gal who's going to do it? This seems to me naive and stupid. And so I think to myself, what is the board thinking? Is it really possible to get rid of James O'Keefe? And, I know how institutions are. I mean, it could be, and I've seen some of this in the reporting on this. Well, James O'Keefe is irascible. James O'Keefe is ADHD. James O'Keefe gets angry and fires people without good cause. Well, let's say all of this is true. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying let's concede that it's true for the purposes of argument. You still have to recognize that you've got a face of the organization, a kind of prime mover of the organization. And if you remove the prime mover, the organization kind of collapses. There's nothing really left without the front guy, the guy who's defining the organization. And so if it is the case that James O'Keefe is not the best manager in the world, he's not the best administrator. I've had jobs where I ran a college between 2010 and 2012, and I told him in my interview, I said, listen, I don't want to be discussing and sitting down and negotiating the lease for the Empire State Building. I want to talk about the renewal of faculty contracts and what the terms are. And they're like, no, Dinesh, you basically run the college, you make all the big decisions, and we will appoint an administrator under you who will essentially make sure all the trains run on time, will organize all that kind of bureaucratic stuff that you don't want to do, and in fact is not your strength. It's not why we're hiring you. So the same here. If it is the case that what James O'Keefe really needs is a kind of partner or a kind of a sort of president of the organization, and O'Keefe becomes the chairman or the CEO, that's the guy who administratively runs things. And again, this is not a new formula. Daily Wire runs this way. Other organizations run this way. You've got one guy who's sort of the visionary, and then you've got another guy who's the administrator. Let's think about the original Microsoft. Bill Gates was the visionary and the software guy, and Steve Ballmer, his partner, and former Harvard roommate, as I understand it, Ballmer was the guy who actually made the trains run on time. So I think that there is a solution here for Project Veritas, and I really hope that the board comes to its senses and they work something out that makes sense. Why? Because we really need James O'Keefe, and we really need Project Veritas.